Well, hey there YouTube. Today I thought I'd show you how I shop and buy Land Rover LR3s, more specifically this Land Rover LR3, because this one is mine. I just bought it. It's a 2007 with 109,000 miles on it, clean title and meticulously maintained. I was able to score this lump of British engineering for $7,500 and only drove 600 miles to get it. So let's check out how I did this and how I recommend you to do the same. So the very first thing that you want to inspect on the truck before you look at anything else is the engine. And that is going to be the major deal breaker of one of these trucks. Before you do anything else, we're going to be inspecting the engine. That is what is going to make or break the deal on this truck. So the first thing you want to get a look at is on each side of the engine. You want to look way down in there, look to make sure that there's no oil seeping out or pooling or anything down on the bottom end of the engine. What that's going to say is the seals are going out on the engine, and that could add up to be very costly repairs in the future. It also is going to depend on what is leaking. Is it just a oil pan gasket? That could easily be replaced. Is it maybe a valve cover gasket? That can also easily be replaced. But is it maybe farther back to where the transmission is? That could very well be a rear main seal. That is very expensive to replace. So the next area we're going to want to look at is underneath the truck. Down here is going to be a very telling area of where to look for oil leakage. Now this is your skid plate for the truck. This is where you're going to see the majority of your oil seepage and oil collection. Now this one is obviously very clean, but if you had any leaks on the engine, this is where it's going to show up. It's going to show up right about on this crossbar here, and it's also going to show up on this skid plate. Now back here is the transfer case and the transmission. That is where you see a ton of leaks happening, especially on first generation LR3s. You get the transmission filter gasket or transmission filter itself, the seal begins to go out, and transmission fluid begins to accumulate on this and cause dirt and grime. But if that is something that you see on the one that you're looking at, just be aware that it could very well be a rear main causing that, or if it's transmission fluid, you most likely are going to need a transmission pan gasket. Next, you want to look at is your oil dipstick. Pull that out, check the level, make sure that that looks good. Also check for any funny kind of chocolate milk looking colors. That gives way to moisture being in the oil, which is not something you want. This one looks very good. Also check your fluids, make sure those are well maintained. Next, what we're going to want to do is start the truck. This is where the engine is going to give away all of its deadly secrets, is when it starts. First, we're going to want to come around and look, did any smoke come out of the exhaust? If you get a little bit starting off, where it's kind of like a whitish smoke coming out, that could be a sign of valve stem seals going out on the engine. Not a very common occurrence, but it does happen sometimes. That's something you're going to look for. Next, we're going to want to look at warning lights. I have a TPS sensor looking like that needs to be replaced, but that is not a big deal. But what we really want to do is we want to hear the health of the engine. So stick your head outside of the truck with one foot on the gas and give it a rev. Make sure it sounds healthy. Make sure you aren't hearing any clinking, clattering, clanking noises of some sort, like bearings are starting to go out. That's going to tell you a lot about the health of the engine. Yeah, this one's healthy. Another tip is leave the truck running while you're checking out the rest of the vehicle. Leave it running so the thing heats all the way up to operating temperature and stays sitting. If the truck is going to overheat, it's going to do it now, and it's going to show up on there because the truck's not going anywhere, air's not going over the radiator, and it's going to overheat if it does have an overheating problem. So while we're in the driver area here, here's another little secret that you can tell if how the truck was driven. Look on this side of the brake pedal. that is where typically when you're driving in stop and go traffic, you're switching back and forth from this pedal. If the truck or vehicle, this is gonna be in any vehicle, if the vehicle was driven a lot in heavy stop and go traffic, this part here of the pedal is gonna be worn down more so than the rest of it. This one seems to be pretty evenly worn, which tells me it wasn't driven a whole lot, which is also given in the amount of miles it has. But so I've seen some of these to where they're actually worn down to the metal behind it. So yeah, keep an eye on that. So another thing that you can check on these LR3s is very common as the sunroof seal or sunroof drains going out on it or being plugged and rainwater overflows, comes down your channels here and collects down in the floor area. So something you can do is move your mat aside and feel in this area if it's wet. Water will collect and pool here and sit here for the longest time deep down in here, and so if this is wet or feels soggy or even shows maybe some signs of moisture settlement, that's a good sign that your sunroof seal is going out and will need to be replaced. So while the truck is running, you also want to check the air suspension on it. A huge common issue with these trucks is air suspension pumps and level sensors going out. That's definitely something you're going to want to check. Down and up. Very good. So now that we've gone over some of the mechanical things that could go wrong with the truck, let's now check out the cosmetic stuff to look for. Look for areas where it seems like the truck might have been repaired from an accident or something. You can typically tell that by imperfections in the paint and the reflection. You can see, if you see a lot of like bubbles or ripples or something in the paint, you can tell that that area might have been repainted at some point, making you want to look more deeper into the history report of the truck. I happen to notice that on this panel, specifically on my truck, had been repainted. I can tell. You can see just the imperfections in the clear coat there versus a panel that hadn't been painted. Not necessarily a bad thing, but just something to be wary of. Another dead giveaway area of the vehicle had been repainted is in the door jambs. Pull the weather stripping away and look to see how good was the repair job if it had been done. Did they correctly tape off or remove the door jamb weather stripping? Did they maybe get any overspray on the weather stripping around? These are all areas where you can check and see if the truck was repainted, and if it was, how well it was repainted. Obviously on this truck, or on this area of the truck, there was no repainting being done. So it seems like the repair job was just isolated to this area here. So everything else checks out good. Now let's go for the test drive. The test drive. Quite possibly the most awkward few minutes you'll spend with the owner of the vehicle. This is where you're going to want to make sure he shuts up so that you can listen to everything that the truck is doing. Check the stereo, check the windows, make sure everything is good and tidy. Make sure the transmission is shifting good, go through all the gears. Don't be afraid to step on it. I don't care what he says, tell him to strap down, because you're gonna need to punch it to make sure. There goes the camera. Now the most expensive thing that you're gonna wanna listen and feel for is the transmission. Transmissions are prone to issues in these vehicles, specifically from 05 to 07. 07 is kind of, I spoke specifically to a Land Rover independent shop who works on them all day long, nothing but Land Rovers, and they said specifically that 07 and up LR3s is your better bet for a good transmission. So what you'll want to feel for if the transmission is having any issues is when you put your foot down, the throttle, the acceleration is good and linear. It's not gapping, it's not shaking, or feels like it's skipping or anything. That could be a sign of issue. So far, so good. Everything seems to check out well with this. So if you've made it this far and you haven't had any issues, congratulations. The truck's probably in really good shape and you might want to consider buying it. So don't let anyone out there tell you that you can't inspect your own vehicle. Just by looking at these few key things, you'll be able to separate the bad ones from the good ones. And if you have a mechanic that can go with you, even better. This truck is one amazing feat of engineering. It combines so many high-tech features that were all way ahead of its time, into a very practical and versatile vehicle that you can daily drive or use as a work truck. So as always, I hope you guys learned something from this video today. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I can. Thanks for watching. See ya.